There is a kind of knowing that arrives before the explanation. You feel it first. The mind catches up later. And if you are watching this right now, something in you already moved before I said a single word. I want you to stay with me. Not because of the title, because of what the title stirred in you when you read it. That small jolt. That quiet, wait. Is this for me? That is not curiosity. That is recognition. My name is George. I am not here to entertain you, and I am not here to flatter you. I have spent years sitting with people who carry something they cannot name. Believers who love God, who serve, who show up, and who still feel like strangers in their own lives. And what I have learned, sitting across from them in living rooms and church basements and late-night phone calls, is that the ones who feel most alone are almost always the ones carrying the most. So let me say it plainly. If you clicked here, I already know something about you. You have spent a long time feeling like you were standing slightly outside the room. Everyone else seemed to have the manual. You were improvising. You laughed at the jokes a half-second late. You agreed with things your spirit quietly rejected. And somewhere along the way you decided the problem was you. It was never you. There is a word the Father reserves for the few who are willing to hear it without flinching. And this is one of them. So let me tell you why only a handful of people will ever truly receive what I am about to say, and why the timeline of your life is about to split in two. Think about a fork in a river for a second. The water does not announce the split. There is no sign, no fanfare, no horn. The river simply arrives at a place where the land divides, and the same water that traveled together for miles suddenly goes two completely different directions. One branch finds the ocean. The other dries up in a field nobody remembers. And here is the part that should sit heavy on you. The water never feels the moment it chooses. It just keeps moving. The choice happens underneath, in the current, long before anyone could point to it. Your life has a fork like that, and you are standing at it right now. Most people will hear a message like this and treat it like a nice feeling. They will nod. Maybe they will leave a comment, and then they will close the app and walk back into the exact same life, carrying the exact same weight, telling themselves the exact same story. The split will happen, and they will sleep through it. That is not cruelty. That is just gravity. It takes something to wake up, and most people would rather stay asleep where it is warm. But you are still here. Which tells me you are not most people. Let me take you to a man named Gideon. You might know the name. You might not. It does not matter. Because Gideon did not know who he was either. When God found him, Gideon was hiding. Literally hiding, crouched in a winepress, threshing wheat in secret, because he was terrified of the enemies who kept stealing everything his people grew. This is a man at the bottom. A man managing his fear by making himself small. And the angel of the Lord shows up and says something that must have sounded like a cruel joke. He calls him a mighty man of valor. Sit with the absurdity of that. A coward, hiding in a hole, called mighty. And Gideon does exactly what you would do. He argues. He says, if God is with us, why is all this happening? He says, my family is the weakest, and I am the least in my family. He lists every reason he is the wrong man. He has a whole speech ready, because he has been rehearsing his own smallness his entire life. Here is what most people miss about that story. God never argued back. He did not sit there and debate Gideon's self-image point by point. He did not say, no, your family is actually quite strong. He just said, go in the strength you have, not the strength you wish you had. Not the strength you are waiting to feel, the strength already in you, that you have spent years calling weakness. That is the first thing I need you to understand. The calling does not wait for you to feel qualified. If it did, it would never come at all, because the people God marks almost always feel like the least likely. The hiding ones, the overlooked ones, the ones threshing their wheat in secret, hoping nobody notices how scared they really are. Does that land? Be honest with yourself, because nobody else is in the room. How much of your life have you spent making yourself smaller so the people around you would feel comfortable? How many times did you swallow a thing you knew was true because saying it out loud would have set you apart? You have been threshing wheat in a winepress, and heaven has been watching the whole time, not with disappointment, with patience, waiting for the day you would be ready to hear your real name. Now here is where it gets real. There is a reason you have always felt different, and it is not the reason you think. You have probably blamed it on 100 things over the years. Your childhood, your personality, the things that happened to you that you never asked for. And those things are real. I am not waving them away. But underneath all of it, there is something the world has no category for. You were set apart before you arrived. Not because you earned it, not because you are better, but because the one who made you wrote something into you that was meant to be revealed at a specific time, and that time is not your childhood, and it is not your past. It is now. Let me tell you about Joseph, a boy who had dreams nobody wanted to hear. He saw things, he sensed things, and when he spoke them out loud, his own brothers despised him for it. They did not just dislike him, they threw him in a pit and sold him to strangers. Imagine being 17 years old, gifted with sight, and having that very gift be the reason your family turns on you. Imagine learning that the thing that makes you different is the thing that makes you a target. You know that feeling, don't you? The gift that became a wound. The sensitivity that everyone told you to toughen out of. The way you could feel the temperature of a room the second you walked in, and how exhausting it was that nobody else seemed to carry that. You learned to hide it, the same way Joseph probably learned to stop sharing his dreams. You buried the thing that made you you, because the world punished you for it. But watch what happens to Joseph. Years of slavery. Years in a prison for a crime he never committed. And every single thing that was meant to destroy him, every betrayal, every closed door, every night, on a cold floor, was quietly forming the exact man who would one day save an entire nation from famine. When he finally stands in front of the brothers who sold him, he does not destroy them. He weeps. And he says the line that should rearrange how you see your whole life. He says, "You meant it for evil, but God meant it for good." You meant it for evil, God meant it for good. Everything you went through that you thought was wasted, it was not wasted. It was the pit before the palace. It was the training nobody could see. The loneliness you have carried was not punishment. It was preparation. God does not raise the people he calls in the crowd. He raises them in the wilderness, away from the noise, where the only voice loud enough to hear is his. And I know, because I have walked this road, and I have walked it with hundreds of others, that there is a part of you right now wondering if this is real, wondering if you are just hearing what you want to hear. Let me speak to that part directly, because it is not your enemy. It is the part of you that has been hurt before by promises that did not hold. It is the part that got its hopes up once and paid for it. I am not asking you to silence that part. I am asking you to let it sit in the back of the room for the next few minutes while the rest of you listens. Because here is the truth about the timeline split. It is not a future event. It is happening as you breathe. Every person watching this is, in this moment, deciding which branch of the river they are on. And the decision is not made with a dramatic gesture. It is made in the quiet. It is made in whether you let this message pass through your eyes or whether you let it pass through your spirit. There are messages that pass through your eyes, and there are messages that pass through your spirit. If something in you recognized itself while watching, don't dismiss it. That is the spirit, confirming what was already written. The secret protocol carries 7 keys that unveil what heaven deposited in you before you ever arrived. Things no one around you has ever been able to name. It comes with the full audiobook for your moments of prayer, silence, and encounter with God. And you also receive the Awakening Map, the guide that illuminates the 5 seasons of spiritual awakening, revealing with precision exactly where you are and what comes next. The link is pinned in the first comment, but only for a limited time. Don't let this moment pass without a response. I tell you about those keys not to sell you something, but because I have watched what happens when a person finally gets language for the thing they have carried in silence their whole life. Something breaks open. The shame lifts. They stop apologizing for being made the way they were made. And the river, which had been quietly carrying them toward the dry field, turns toward the ocean. Now let me show you the other side of this. Because a split has two directions, and I would be lying to you if I only showed you the bright one. There was a man named Saul. Not Saul who became Paul, a different Saul, the first king of Israel. And Saul is one of the most heartbreaking figures in the whole of Scripture, because Saul started exactly where you are starting. He was chosen. The prophet Samuel poured oil over his head and told him plainly that the Spirit of God would come upon him and turn him into a different man. A different man. That is the language of a timeline split, if I have ever heard it. Saul was standing at his fork, and heaven had marked the branch that led to the ocean. And here is the tragedy. Saul could not stop measuring himself by the crowd. He could not stop needing the approval of the people. When the moment came to obey God fully, he obeyed partly, and then he lied about it, and then he blamed the people for it. He kept choosing the smaller story. He kept choosing comfort over calling. And slowly, so slowly that he probably never felt the day it happened. The anointing that had once rested on him lifted. The river had split, and Saul, the chosen one, spent the rest of his life on the branch that dried up. I am not telling you this to frighten you. I am telling you because I love you enough to be honest. Being chosen is not the same as arriving. The calling is given freely. The walk is chosen daily. Saul proves that you can be marked by heaven and still talk yourself out of the inheritance, one small compromise at a time. The split is real, and it is not automatic, and the branch you take is decided in the 1,000 quiet choices nobody else ever sees. So which Saul are you going to be? Not the question of whether you were chosen that was settled before you were born. The question is whether you will be the Saul who became a different man, or the Saul who kept looking over his shoulder at the crowd. Let me tell you about a prophet who stood exactly where you are standing, at the place where the river divides, and almost chose the branch that dries up. His name was Elijah, and if you only know him as the bold man who called down fire from heaven, you do not know the half of his story. Because right after the greatest victory of his life, Elijah fell apart. Picture it. He had just stood alone against hundreds of false prophets, one man against a crowd, and God answered him with fire that fell from the sky and consumed everything, in front of the whole nation. It was the vindication, the moment that proved he had been right all along to stand apart. And what happened next? A threat came. One person sent word that she would kill him, and this man, who had faced down an entire crowd without blinking, ran. He ran into the wilderness, sat down under a tree, and asked God to let him die. Let that sink in, because this is the truth nobody warns you about. The loneliest moment often comes right after the highest one. Elijah was not afraid during the battle. He fell apart after it, when the noise was gone and the silence came rushing in, and he realized he was, once again, completely alone. He said the words that every set-apart person says at some point in the dark. He said, "I am the only one left. I alone am left. I alone." Have you ever said that? Maybe not out loud. Maybe just in the quiet of a car in a parking lot, or staring at a ceiling at 3 in the morning. The feeling that you are the only one who carries this, the only one who sees it, the only one still standing for something nobody else seems to value anymore. Elijah believed it completely, and he was a prophet. He had heard the voice of God directly, and still he sank to the place where he wanted his life to be over. Here is what God did, and it is so tender it should bring you to tears. He did not rebuke Elijah. He did not hand him a lecture about faith. He let him sleep. He sent an angel to feed him twice and let him rest in the shade. God knew that sometimes a worn-out servant does not need correction. He needs a meal and a nap, and the reminder that he is not as alone as he feels. And then, gently, God led him to a mountain, and there came a great wind, and an earthquake, and a fire. But God was not in any of those. And after all the noise, there came a still small voice, a whisper. And in that whisper, God told Elijah the thing that breaks the lie of loneliness wide open. He said, "You are not the only one. I have 7,000 others who have never bowed the knee." 7,000. Elijah thought he was the last one. He was one of 7,000 he simply could not see. And that is the secret about being set apart, that the enemy works so hard to keep from you. Set apart does not mean abandoned. It means you have not met your people yet. The branch toward the ocean is not empty. It only looks empty from where you are standing, in the wilderness, under your tree, certain you are the last one left. Now let me bring this all the way down to the ground, into a life that looks like yours. Maybe you are sitting in a kitchen right now with dishes still in the sink. Maybe there are people in the next room who love you, but have never once understood the deepest thing about you. Maybe you go to work tomorrow and put on the version of yourself that everyone is comfortable with, and you carry the real one home, like a secret in your coat. That gap between the self you show and the self you are, that gap is exactly where the split happens. Because every day, you have a choice about which one you feed. I think about Esther, a young woman who, by every appearance, had a comfortable life. She was inside the palace. She was safe. She could have stayed quiet and kept her secret and lived out her days in comfort. And her cousin Mordecai sends her a message that should be tattooed on the inside of every chosen heart. He tells her, "Do not think that you will escape just because you are in the king's house." And then he says it, "Perhaps you have come to this position for such a time as this. For such a time as this. Not for a comfortable time, not for an easy time. For this exact moment, with these exact circumstances, with this exact weight on your shoulders." Esther had to decide whether her safety was worth more than her calling. She had to walk into a room where she could have been killed, on behalf of people who could not save themselves. And she said the words that mark every true crossing of the fork. She said, "If I perish, I perish." That is what it costs to take the branch toward the ocean. Not your life, necessarily, but your comfort, your need to be liked, your attachment to the smaller, safer story where nobody is disappointed in you and nothing is asked of you. Esther laid that down. And because she did, an entire people lived who would have died. You are in the king's house too. Whatever your house looks like, your job, your family, your routine, you did not arrive there by accident. You are positioned, and the timeline split is asking you the Esther question. Will you stay small and safe in the palace, or will you walk into the room you have been avoiding your whole life? And I want to give you one more, because this one might be the most important of all. Think about David. Before he was a king, before he was a giant killer, he was the youngest of 8 brothers, the one left in the field with the sheep, while the prophet Samuel came to anoint the next king. Think about that. The prophet of God comes to your house to find the chosen one, and your own father does not even bother to call you in from the field. Your father lines up your 7 brothers, the strong ones, the impressive ones, the ones who look the part, and you are not even considered worth bringing to the table. That is rejection at the root. That is being overlooked by the people who were supposed to see you first. And maybe that is your story too. Maybe you grew up the one who was easy to forget, the afterthought, the one whose gifts nobody in your own house ever named. Samuel looked at the oldest brother, the tall one, the obvious one, and thought, surely this is him. And God said the line that should set you free. He said, "Man looks at the outward appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart. Do not be moved by what is impressive to people. I have already chosen the one in the field." And they had to send for David. The whole ceremony stopped and waited, while someone ran to the pasture to fetch the boy nobody thought to invite. He walks in, sweat on his face, no idea what is happening, and the oil pours over his head in front of the very brothers who left him outside. The overlooked one, the forgotten one, the chosen one, all at the same time. Heaven has been keeping you in the field for a reason. It was never because you were forgotten. It was because the one whose opinion actually counts was looking at your heart the entire time the world was busy being impressed by someone else. Here is the part I most want you to hear. The part I would lean across the table and say with my hand on your shoulder if I could. The loneliness you have felt, that ache of being the only one who sees what you see, feels what you feel, carries what you carry. That loneliness was never proof that something was wrong with you. It was the cost of the calling, paid in advance. The ones who are set apart feel set apart. That is what the words mean. You were not malfunctioning. You were being prepared in the only school that teaches what you needed to learn, which is the school of the wilderness, where God does his finest work in his most beloved children. Moses spent 40 years in the desert before the burning bush. 40 years. A man who had been a prince, reduced to a shepherd in the middle of nowhere, doing the same small task day after day with no audience and no applause. And he must have thought his life was over. He must have thought whatever he was made for had passed him by. And then one ordinary afternoon, a bush caught fire and did not burn. And the voice of God called him by name. 40 years of nothing and then everything, in a single moment, because the moment had finally come. Your 40 years might have felt like your whole life, but I am telling you the bush is in front of you. The voice is calling your name right now, in this message, in this stirring you cannot quite explain. The split is not coming. It is here. And it does not require you to have it all figured out. It requires one thing, that you turn aside to look. Moses had to turn. He had to stop walking the same path and turn toward the strange fire. That turning was the whole decision. Everything after it was God's part. So here is what I am asking of you. Not a grand gesture, just a turn. A small turning of your spirit toward the thing you have been avoiding because it scared you to want it. The crowd will not turn with you, that is the loneliness, and it is also the proof. The few who receive this will turn, and the many will scroll on, and both groups will tell themselves they made no decision at all. But the river always splits. It always has. The only question is whether you feel it happen or whether you sleep through it. You are awake right now. I can feel it through the screen, the way you have stayed when you usually would have left. That is not an accident. That is the part of you that was set apart, finally getting the chance to breathe. Do not waste it on a feeling. Feelings fade by morning. Take the turn while the fire is in front of you. Walk into the room. Become the different man, the different woman, that the oil was poured over you to become. The branch toward the ocean is right there. It has always been right there. It was just waiting for you to stop looking over your shoulder at a crowd that was never going to understand you anyway. The water is moving. The land is dividing. And you, finally, are not asleep. Now I want to hear from you, and I want you to be specific, because the specific is where the real lives. Somewhere in this message there was one sentence that hit you harder than the rest, one line where you felt the jolt, where the river current shifted under your feet. I want you to find that exact sentence and put it in the comments, and then tell me the one memory it pulled up, not a vague feeling. The actual moment. The kitchen, the phone call, the night you knew you were different and did not have the words. Write it down. Because the moment you name it out loud is the moment it stops owning you in secret, and it becomes the testimony of the day you finally turned toward the fire.